Alright, Kevin, are you recording?
Yeah.
Alright. Just keep the camera really still, okay? And yeah, okay, the notes are in the back. Alright. Have you ever looked into what NASA is doing for us in the genre of space and science? Have you ever looked up and wondered what truly happens up there? Well, NASA could give you all the answers to these questions, whether it's about Mars or the solar system. NASA is the number one source for space exploration and science. I think NASA being underfunded by the government is making all of us less interested about their projects and their amazing discoveries. This topic I am very passionate about because I too had all the same questions about space and was very pleased to find real answers along the way with breathtaking photos and evidence. Today I'm going to talk to you about some of the greatest findings in NASA history. When getting into NASA and space education in general, most people would think that it's all numbers and math, but in reality, NASA is doing much more than that and deserves a better name when it comes to space science. The findings I will present to you today will be the first landing on the moon, new satellites that will orbit planets for even longer, and the future of us being able to live on another planet. Next, I will talk about the first finding of NASA history. Our first visit to the moon. A common misconception of our land on the moon was that we were the first ones to ever do it. Well, in reality, that wasn't the case. Russia actually had the first exploration to the moon. Even after this happening, NASA still continued to try to get us on the moon. Starting by picking the lucky astronauts to carry out this possibly fatal first attempt. Neil Armstrong, commander of Apollo 11, began the first-hand reports to the world of the epic voyage of Eagle and Columbia to the moon and back to Earth. The voyage began at 9:32 a.m. July 16th, when a Saturn V rocket launched Apollo 11 into the Earth from Cape Kennedy. After 1.5 orbits of the Earth, the third stage of the Saturn V refired to send Apollo on the outward journey to the moon. Shortly after that, the command/service module, called Columbia, separated from the Saturn's third stage and turned around. And it connected nose to nose with the lunar module called Eagle, which had been stored in the third stage. With Eagle attached to its nose, Columbia drew away from the third stage and continued toward the moon. Once the men were on the moon, they couldn't believe their eyes, and the only thing on their minds was that they were still alive and they were in outer space. Their second worry was to mount our flag in the moon's soil. They did both of these and soon headed back to Earth with their findings all in one piece. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was the start of our entire future. Moving on from our first triumph of NASA, we now find ourselves going further than just the moon, thus orbiting satellites/telescopes were born. Without these satellites, NASA states there would be no possible way to capture all of space, and they needed something for this hard task. Sorry, my notes disappeared. The idea behind communication satellites is very simple. You send a signal into space and send it back down to another spot on the globe. NASA's engineers soon discovered the easiest way to accomplish this was to bounce signals off a giant metal balloon that was floating in orbit. The concept was developed in the ECHO program, and ECHO 1 became the first successful launch, and it was on August 12, 1960. The balloon enabled voice communications of good quality between scientists at Bell Laboratories in Holmdel, New Jersey, and a NASA facility in Goldstone, California. This alone was already ahead of its time, but the satellites made now would put these to shame. NASA's Project Mercury had specific goals, and the first of those was very clear: to orbit a manned spacecraft around the Earth. On February 20th, 1962, the goal was accomplished as John Glenn sped around the globe 3 times inside the capsule nicknamed Friendship 7. The mission lasted only 5 hours, but NASA's manned satellite program is now in operation 24 hours a day. It's known as the International Space Station, which is still in space as we speak right now. Now that I've explained our first landing and some satellites that were made, we find ourselves in the present. So what history has NASA made now, you ask? Well, NASA's biggest project for 2018 is the Space Launch System and the Orion aircraft, which is the aircraft that could potentially get us to Mars if we needed it to. There are countless projects that must succeed in order for NASA to make good on its mission to potentially put humans on Mars. But the most critical of them all is probably the innovative Space Launch System, the most powerful rocket NASA has ever built. It will be the launch vehicle for the Orion spacecraft, also currently under development, and designed to safely transport a small crew of astronauts further into space than humans have ever traveled before. Both systems have undergone a bunch of tests for years now. NASA is not quite sure if this is completely safe and possible, so more tests will need to be ran to limit error. And as of now, we are on track for November 8, 2018 to launch and orbit around the moon, a so-called dress rehearsal for the ambitious manned missions going forward. So we're just going to test it on the moon just to make sure that no one else gets hurt in the process. Now, you're probably asking, why did I tell you all this information? Well, NASA not only is being mocked for their low budget from the government, but is also underestimated on how crazy and futuristic all this progress and information actually is. From our first discoveries such as satellites and going to the moon, NASA is always working ahead of us. Don't forget that learning about these things is very important, because who knows what the capability of all this information is. And plus, it actually is super satisfying to know about the unknown. So next time you look up at those stars, consider having your own exploration with the help of NASA and their whole team. Thank you.